We're good? All right, it is 11:01, so I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome back to Sunday school. It's been a, Investigate, sorry, wrong terminology. It's been, 11 months since we've been able to do this, so I am glad to be back up here. I'm always excited to teach. It's an opportunity to serve. There is another reason I'm excited to be up here this morning. If you've noticed, my sister, sitting right here in the front, second row back, she's wearing her glasses this morning. So why I find this funny is when we were kids, like little, we used to have these old pair of glasses frames, like with just nothing in them, I think, and she used to run around the house wearing them because she always wanted glasses as a kid. Now, at the same time, she also wanted braces. So she would tear off little strips of aluminum foil. Yeah. And put it on her teeth. So she would run around the house with her, glass frames and her braces. Now, me as a younger brother, I wanted neither one of those things. And within a couple years, I had both. She never had either. So now she has glasses. So if she gets braces in a couple years, I will be a happy little brother.
They're too expensive.
Anyway, like I said, it's great to be back up here. What the format's going to be over, I guess, hopefully we can keep this going indefinitely, not have any more shutdowns or any other issues. There'll be just a rotation of people that'll be up here teaching various lessons. So what I'm going to do is kind of continue what I started last year, ironically on February 16th of 2020, when I started a series of lessons on the history of the Israelite people. History of the Hebrews, if you remember the topic of, it was a play on Adam. I had to pick on this Hebrews lesson again. So this would be the 9th lesson in that series, but since I've taught the previous 8 over a year period, some of it's been on Sunday morning, some of it's been Sunday night, some of it's been Wednesday nights to various people here and there, what I really wanted to do is just kind of walk back through where we've been over the past year. So a lot of this will be review, although looking around, I can maybe pick out 1 to 2 people that have been in every lesson that I taught. So those 2 people, I guess they can take a nap or whatever you want to do. The rest of you, there'll probably be some new material that we went over that you didn't hear last year. So I've already talked about this several times, but what is the reason of studying the Old Testament? We're a New Testament church, we say that all the time. Why do we study the Old Testament? What were some of the reasons we talked about? Examples? History? That's the big one I love. This is my, well, if I turn it on, it might work better. Let's try it. There we go. This is the picture that, no, wrong one. Let's go back. There we go. This is the picture I love. When we think of the Old Testament Bible stories, the Sunday school stories, so to speak, that we learn as kids and then seem to forget about as adults, this is a lot of the pictures that we see in the picture books, even when we're reading to our kids at night. Is this a realistic example of world history and biblical history? No, this is something that you would see in one of those nice little fable books. So we have to realize that the Old Testament and all of its stories are actual world history that we can teach our kids, absolutely, but we need to remember as adults as well. So that's one of the big reasons to study the Old Testament. It's world history. A couple other reasons. The Old Testament, it really gives us an additional insight to God. The New Testament seems to maybe focus a little bit more on the love aspects of God's. The Old Testament is more on the truth and justice side. We see a lot of God's justice in the Old Testament. We need to remember that is a very important aspect of God. Old Testament really brings that home. There is also lots and lots of New Testament themes in the Old Testament. And if we don't understand those Old Testament meanings, we really can't get that comprehension of what it means in the New Testament, especially with Christ. Just reading the New Testament, you will miss so much of those little tidbits about Jesus and how he fulfilled things if you don't understand that Old Testament. Brings it all together. So that's why I tend to focus here on this, that first part of it. So that's really the reasons I wanted to do this series of lessons. So when we started last year, we all started with one man. There we go. Who was this? Where did we start with? Abraham, good old Father Abraham. He's called Father Abraham for a reason. He was the father of the Israelite nation. Even today, the Jewish faith is based on Father Abraham. Now, where was Abraham when God first spoke to him? This might help. Ur is a great answer, but God did not actually speak to Abraham at this point. Terah, we learned, Abraham's father, was in Ur. He left. Oh, we got lasers. I like this. He left Ur and went up to Haran with the intent to continue on down to Canaan. Did Terah, Abraham's father, make it to Canaan? No, he stopped in Haran. We don't know why. He lived for another 20 to 40 years afterwards, so he didn't die. He just stopped. The thought is maybe God talked to Terah and told him to go, but Terah gave up. He didn't fulfill God's plan. So God went to his son Abraham, and it's in Haran where we have the first recorded message of what God says to Abraham. If you want to turn in your Bibles, you can follow along. Some of it I'll have up on the screen, some of it we can look up. Go to Genesis 12. Genesis 12, starting in verse 1. So these are going to be the first words that we know definitely that God spoke to Abraham. All right, in verse 1, and the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. Here's the key part. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. This is the key promise that follows through the rest of the Old Testament. This is the key verse from here on out. Now, what's it mean? All the families in the earth are going to be blessed. How's that? Christ, who is a descendant of Abraham. It's through Abraham's lineage that all the earth is going to be blessed through Christ. How did Christ bless us? We don't have to go to hell. We get to live in eternity with God in heaven if we obey him. That is an amazing blessing, and it all started with Abraham through this promise that God shared with him. All right, so instead of stopping in Canaan after Abraham leaves Haran, he continues down with Sarah, with all of his livestock, with his servants. We know of one other named individual, Lot, Abraham's nephew. He comes down through Canaan, but instead of stopping, where does he go? We talked about. He goes on down to Egypt because there's a famine in the land of Canaan. Egypt has lots of food. He decides, hey, let's go down there. Now, as they're entering Egypt, what does Abraham tell Sarah, his wife, to tell the Egyptians? That she is his sister. Why? Okay, there we go. I heard a lot of mumbling, then I heard a clear voice. Yes, Abraham tells Sarah, say you're my sister, because I'm afraid that somebody's going to see you, want you as his wife. The only way to get you as his wife is to kill me, Abraham. So you say I'm his sister. Does what he thinks happen actually happen? Who takes an interest in Sarah? Pharaoh. Who's Pharaoh? The top dog, the most important man in the entire land of Egypt. Do you think he would have had the power to kill Abram and take Sarah? Yes, he would have. So Abraham's prediction comes true. Sarah is taken into Pharaoh's household. So Abraham loses his wife, but he's still alive. That's the important part. As we go through this lesson, these are not perfect people by any stretch of the imagination. These people make all kinds of poor decisions. They have lots of character flaws, but yet, ultimately, they are striving to serve God, and God uses them. God does not require us to be perfect. God requires us to strive for perfection. And we see that very well demonstrated in the Old Testament as we continue on through. All right. God, he doesn't like this, event of Pharaoh taking Sarah. So he intervenes. The end result is that Pharaoh kicked Abraham and Sarah out of his territory with heavily armed men. He said, get them out of here. However, what does he also give to Abraham and Sarah? Yep, lots of possessions. So he gives them lots of livestock. and he also gives them male and female servants. What was likely one of the names of those female servants? Hagar. Hagar is going to play a very important part in the story here very soon. She was an Egyptian. She was Sarah's servant. She probably picked her up from Pharaoh's household. So Abraham and Sarah, they're kicked out of Egypt, but yet they have amassed great wealth. God has started his physical blessing of Abraham through this event. Even though it was a very poor decision from Abraham and a lie, God still uses that as a blessing. So Abraham is a wealthy man when he returns to Canaan. We talked about how Abraham and Lot, they eventually parted ways because they had large herds. Where did Lot go? The wonderful resort towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. That was an excellent choice on his part. See? Soon after, though, Abraham has to come to Lot's rescue. Sodom and Gomorrah attacked. He's taken away as a captive. Abraham gets his men together. They go off and rescue Lot. But on their way back, who do they meet? The mysterious man called Melchizedek. Yes, who is Melchizedek? A form of God. We don't exactly know. There are all kinds of studies. You can look in Hebrews and find out more about Melchizedek, but Abraham comes across Melchizedek and he blesses Abraham. All right, soon after that encounter, we talked about God appeared to Abraham again, saying that he's going to bless him even more. He's already a very wealthy man. He's got all these herds and servants, possessions, but he's going to bless him more. Abraham, he's having a little pity party. He says, God, what's the point? I don't have anybody to leave it to. I don't need more blessings. I don't have an heir. I don't need it. He's kind of just crying his milk there a little bit. God recognizes this and he says, I will give you a son. I will give you an heir that you can pass all this down through, including the spiritual promise that I've already given you. After trying for less than a year to become pregnant, that's how you have a son, Sarah has an idea. What is it? This is where Hagar comes into the picture. Sarah's plan was for Abram to marry Hagar. So Hagar is basically going to become an equal in the household with Sarah. She's going to be a wife, just like Sarah is a wife. Equality there. But Hagar is going to get pregnant. She's going to carry a child for 9 months. She's going to go through childbirth. She's going to see the miracle of a child that is half her, completely. Then she's going to give it to Sarah and act like the whole thing never happened. Sarah's plan was for Hagar to go back to her place as a servant while her baby grows up calling another woman mommy. Is this a great plan? It's not. Abraham, for some reason, decides, hey, I'll do it. Sure, why not? Let's go along with it. How's it work out? Not good. Hagar becomes pregnant. She gives birth to the son named Ishmael. Who is Ishmael known as today? One of the great men, the prophets of Islam. Can we say that our repercussions have, the decisions we make now have repercussions in the future? 4,000 years ago, they made one decision. We're living with it today. Ishmael is born. Sarah, you would think, should be happy, but nope, immediately she wants to run Hagar and Ishmael out of camp. Abraham says, fine, do with him what you want. She's your servant. This is a great guy. You gotta love him. It's Valentine's, by the way. Don't treat your spouse this way. Just saying, little plug there. God intervenes yet again. He comes and tells Hagar, go back to camp. I will also make Ishmael a great nation. So Hagar goes back to camp, where for 13 years, Ishmael is Abraham's only son and direct heir. Do you think that Abraham and Ishmael had a special bond? Absolutely. 13 years, his only son. In fact, it's so strong that he eventually will beg God, please let Ishmael be the son of the promise. Not the one that you had in mind, not the one that, we're going to do it your way. We try to do it this way. I want this boy, my son, to be the son of the promise, Ishmael. There was a very tight bond there. God says no, obviously. He appears to Abram yet again. This time he's on his way to Sodom and Gomorrah to do what? To destroy them. But he says within a year, Abram and Sarah are going to have a son, the son that he met 13 years before. God does things in his times and his way. We need to remember that. How old is Abraham and Sarah at this point? Old. 99 and 89. They're going to be new parents at the age of 100. I don't want to try that. So pretty much immediately after God's visit, Abraham decides to move to the city of Ger. So he's going to move over a little bit there to Ger. Again, this is a great land to go if you're looking for food for your livestock. It's near the coast. There's lots of water, lots of forage. So he moves to the city of Ger. Okay, as he's moving into this land, what again does he decide to tell Sarah to tell all the local people? Again, he says, Sarah, say that you are my sister. It worked out well for him the first time. I'm not exactly sure. This time, who takes an interest in Sarah? King Abimelech. We talked about him a little bit. Abimelech, again, hey, I like her at the age of, there you go, bring her into my household. God, again, does not like this turn of events. He intervenes, does some bad things. Abimelech recognizes what he's done is a sin against God. He immediately calls in Abraham. There's lots of finger wagging. If you read the text, you can tell. Again, he kicks him out of his territory. But again, what does Abraham get in return? More possessions, including around 1,000 pieces of silver. This money is going to come into play a little bit later, and I think it's what Abraham will eventually buy a field and a cave with down the road. So he is kicked out of Abimelech's territory. Soon afterwards, Isaac is born, fulfilling God's initial promise. This is the heir to the son. Sarah, again, gets jealous, and she wants Hagar and Ishmael gone. This time, God intervenes and says, Abraham, it's okay. Abraham apparently actually sticks up for her this time. He says, it's okay, let them go. I am also going to bless Ishmael. I'm going to make him a great nation as well. It's okay to let them go. Isaac is now your son of the promise. So Hagar and Ishmael head out. Abraham has another run-in with Abimelech over some wells, but eventually that's resolved, and Abraham digs a well we talked about near the town of Beersheba. There's still a well there, 4,000 years later, that Abraham dug. This stuff is real history. It's not just in a book. You can actually go and physically touch these places. This is real stuff. It's not just a fake Bible story, a fable that we read to our kids at night. Several years pass. God decides to test Abraham. What was the test that he wanted? Go kill your son Isaac. Now, this is a very disturbing story to, I think, any parent, especially one who has sons. How could you do it? Abraham had faith. He knew that Isaac was the son of the promise. He knew that somehow Isaac was going to be okay. But how, as a parent, could you cause that type of pain and suffering on your child for no reason other than to demonstrate your faith to God? I don't know, but Abraham does it. However, Isaac is saved. He's not sacrificed. A lamb is put in the place. But this, if you read the story again, is an excellent foreshadowing of the crucifixion of Christ. You can't understand the full aspect of Christ without learning the Old Testament. So Isaac is saved. He's still the son of the promise. It's not long after that Sarah died, and Abraham negotiates for the field or the cave of Machpelah. Remember, we talked about that nice little bartering system that they had back and forth. He buys it, I think, using the money that he got from Abimelech. That's just my opinion. Abraham marries again, had other children, but those children were given gifts, their wives, and they were sent away. They were not the heirs of the promise. So when Abraham dies at the age of 175, all of his possessions and that spiritual promise was transferred to Isaac. He is then buried by Isaac, and ironically enough, and Ishmael. So there was still a contact there between the two groups. Isaac and Ishmael bury their father Abraham in the cave of Machpelah next to his wife Sarah. So that's where we left off with Abraham. Questions, comments? No one's running away screaming, so I take that as a good thing. All right, so Isaac is where we really focused on next, and we already talked quite a bit about him. But prior to Abraham's death, he decided that at the age of 40, Isaac is still single. He needs a wife. Instead of having someone from the local area, he sends his servant back to the homeland of Haran, because when Terah left Ur and went to Haran and Abraham separated, Terah and Abraham's rest of his family stayed in that area. So he sends a servant back to Haran. I want you to find a wife from our extended family for my son Isaac. The servant goes. Who does he find? Rebecca. Hit the slide for me. There we go. So this was the family tree we kind of went over. We had Terah, Abraham, his half-sister Sarah. They had Isaac. He finds Rebecca, who is a descendant here from Nahor, and her brother Laban. Rebecca agrees to go with the servant. She comes back, and she marries Isaac. Isaac and Rebecca were married about 20 years. What's the natural result of a family union? In a lot of cases, typically there are children that are born. But after 20 years, they had still not had children. Isaac prayed to God. Eventually, Rebecca conceived. However, there seemed to be trouble because she also reached out to God, and God answered her with a prophecy. Hit the button there. There we go. So Genesis 25:23 said, "The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people will be separated from your body. The one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So here we have a prophecy given to Rebekah by God. Rebekah has twin boys. What were they named? Jacob and Esau. Who's the oldest? Esau is the oldest. Jacob is slightly younger. Now, on a side note, at this point, we are 2,000 years from the creation of the world. 2,000 years have passed from when God said, "Let there be light," to when Jacob and Esau are born. How many direct connections did it take to get back to Adam? By direct connection, I mean one person physically able to talk to another person who could then have talked to another person at a younger age who could have then have talked so-and-so back to Adam. How many connections? 2,000 years. 3. 3 connections would get you back to Adam. Hit this next slide for me. And if you look at this, these aren't just kind of a faint overlap. If you had Jacob and Esau, which would overlap with Shem. Shem was alive for 59 years after Jacob and Esau were born. 59 years. This is the guy who went through the flood. 59 years, he had a chance to run into Jacob and Esau. Now, Shem overlapped with Methuselah by 98 years before the flood. 98 years, again, pretty good time period. And Methuselah overlapped with Adam with 243 years. Now, we're talking about a different period of time where even though the geographical area is fairly small, transportation is pretty much by foot. You didn't have any other communication by telephone, telegraph, anything, smoke signals. I don't think they had been invented yet even. You had to physically walk to see somebody and talk to them. Could there have been communication between these groups? You've got decades of overlap. It's very, very possible. So just kind of puts it in perspective. 3 connections could take you from Jacob and Esau all the way back to the creation of the world. Imagine the history that those people could have shared with one another. And I find it fascinating. Okay, the twins, back to them, have very different personalities. Genesis 25 says that Esau became a skillful hunter and a man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man who lived in tents. Now, Isaac and Rebekah, they were not good parents in that they didn't love their children the same. They were not equally the same loved of children. Who liked who more? Rebekah liked Jacob, and Isaac liked Esau. Esau was a man's man, so Isaac liked him. Jacob was not. Okay. Now, Esau, even though he was that manly, rugged outdoorsman, he seems to have been a little bit dramatic at the same time. Because remember, when he was out hunting one day, he didn't have any luck. He came back into camp. Jacob liked to cook, so he's there making his big pot of stew. What does Esau say? Even before that, he comes into camp. I'm starving. Starving. Does anybody have kids that come up and say that? You ate 3 hours ago. You're not starving. This is where we bring up people in other countries that are less fortunate than us. Esau had gone out, he had walked around, he had gone and hunted, he had come back in. Do you think he was on the point of death? I can say he was not with all confidence. But yet, he whines, I'm starving. And this is when he says, give me some of your stew. Jacob sees that opportunity. He says, I'll give you stew, you give me your birthright. What is the birthright? We talked about this. It's a couple different things. So when someone died and their possessions were divided up, the one who had the birthright, typically the oldest, got twice as much as all the others. So there was a physical blessing there. More importantly, there was an inheritance of the group. This is a time when the patriarch was in charge of the family group. He was it. There was no other level of authority above that man. He had all authority with the group. When he died, the person who had the birthright inherited that position. So Esau, as the oldest, was set to get more possessions, but also to get the authority of the entire family. Jacob wants this. He says, I'll give you stew. Esau's, sure. What use is the birthright if I'm dead? Dramatic. They make the exchange. Esau goes on his way. But this fulfilled the prophecy. Hit the slide for me. And the older shall serve the younger. God's prophecy came true. Anybody surprised? You shouldn't be. This prophecy was fulfilled through this interaction. All right, so there happened to be another famine in the area. Isaac and family, hit the slide again for me. Go from this area and they head back to the area of Gerar. Again, this gets a lot more moisture, a lot of rain compared to inland. This is where you want to go if there's a famine because there's actually going to be food there. Now, Rebekah, at the age of 80, is apparently quite an attractive woman because Isaac, what does he tell Isaac to say to everyone in Gerar that she is? My sister. Hit the slide for me. When the men of the place asked about his wife, Isaac said, she is my sister, for he was afraid, my wife, thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. He takes a page right out of his father's playbook. It says, do the same thing. Well, who takes an interest? This time it's the new king Abimelech being a similar title to Pharaoh Caesar we talked about. The current king says, I like her, she's pretty, bring her into my household. Again, Isaac has lost his wife just like his father, but what's the important thing? He's still alive. Great people. Are we any different? Probably not. So, King Abimelech discovers the deception with a little help from God. He's upset, but he allows Isaac and company to eventually settle on the edge of his territory, which again is, slide please, yes, back around the area of Beersheba, where his father had dug the wells. Now this is where we get to the last verse of Genesis 26. You can hit it for me. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So this is a key verse that's going to come into play quite a bit later. Esau marries two local women from the Hittite nation. His parents aren't happy about it. Is there anyone in here who has in-laws that aren't happy you married their child? Is there anyone in here who has children that wants to be able to pick their spouse? Okay. This is not a new feeling that we have. Again, these are normal people from the Old Testament. They're not just some strange people. They have the same emotions, the same feelings, the same wants that we have as people 4,000 years later. Real people, not really that different than us, just in different circumstances and different territories. All right, some 40 years pass, and Isaac's health apparently isn't too good because he decides that he needs to pass his blessing officially on to Esau. Apparently, he doesn't know about Jacob and Esau's transaction some 40 years earlier. He tells Esau to go hunting and make a stew for him. Stew must be a big thing in that household, I don't know. But he wants some stew. Who overhears this? Who overhears that conversation? Rebekah. She hears it. She sees a way to slip her favorite in the place of Esau. Remember, she liked Jacob more. Now, or perhaps she just wants him to get the blessing, or maybe Jacob told her about that interaction some 40 years later, and maybe Rebekah sees this as just justice. She's just facilitating it along a little bit. Don't really know. Either way, she manages to whip up some stew pretty quick. Jacob disguises himself with some goat hair and Esau's smelly clothes and manages to convince Isaac that he, Jacob, is Esau. He gets the blessing and runs out right after Esau comes in. Esau discovers what happened. What's his reaction? I don't care about it anyway. Does he certainly care about his birthright now? Now it finally hits him. What happens? Do you think he remembers that little campfire chat that he had? We don't know. Either way, he's not happy about it. He says, as soon as our father Isaac is dead, what's going to happen? I'm going to kill you and I'm going to throw you in the hole next to him. It's literally what he says. You're going to die right afterwards. All right. Isaac appears to recover from whatever health issue that he had because he's going to live for another 25 years. He wasn't on death's doorstep like he seemed to think. But Rebekah is concerned about Jacob, so she uses Esau's earlier marriages as a reason to send Jacob away while hopefully Esau cools off. Jacob, at the age of 80, still hasn't found that special one. So he's unmarried. Rebekah convinces Isaac, send him away back to Haran. Hit the slide for me, please. So again, they're down here. Send Jacob up to Haran where he can find a wife. This is 500 miles. Maybe he's going to be safe from Esau at that point, but also 500 miles. What's the mode of transportation? What's he wearing? At best, some little leather sandals. Just put that in perspective. It's a long way and a long walk, and they are a lot tougher men than I am. I would have died within 10 miles probably. So what does Esau do to get back at his parents? Because he sees what's happened, he sees his mother, he sent him away. Now I can't take it out. What's he do? Goes and marries another local woman. At 80 years old, he's still front and straight in his parents. I mean, that's what he does. He goes and marries a third wife just to tick off his parents, is my opinion. And apparently it was the first night away from home, Jacob had a dream where he saw angels doing what? Going up and down a stairway to heaven, and God speaks to him. Now, this is the first account that we have of God speaking directly to Jacob. God has spoke to Abraham. He's spoken to Isaac. This is the first recorded account of him speaking to Jacob. What has just happened immediately before this, possibly the same day? Jacob has gotten the birthright. He has gotten the spiritual promise passed down from his father now to him. I think God sees this as finally, I can now speak to the next person in line because he is officially the heir. Makes sense. Might be some subjection there. But he speaks to God, and God says that he will be with Jacob and he will bring him back to Canaan, and he's going to be blessed. Jacob makes it to Haran. Who does he meet in the field? What special woman? Rachel. Rachel is in the field. She is the daughter of his uncle Laban. This checks the box of a distant relative. They tried to stay within the family. The DNA was a whole lot purer back then. You could do things like that and not have the issues we have today. She's a distant relative. Jacob stays with the family for around a month before he strikes a deal with Uncle Laban. What's the deal? 7 years, and I get to marry Rachel. 7 years go by. Jacob has to say, hey, Uncle Laban, it's been 7 years. I want my wages. It seems like Laban reluctantly says, okay, I'll arrange everything, gets the feast together. What does Jacob realize the next morning? It's not Rachel. It's her older sister, Leah. Uncle Laban has pulled a fast one and slipped in Leah instead. Jacob's not happy. What new deal does he make? 7 more years for another woman. So he goes ahead, he's able to marry Rachel, but he has now committed himself to another 7 years with Uncle Laban and working for him. So hit the slide for me. All right, so now we have that new tie. You can see the distant relatives taking place. And then we're going to start a new family tree with Jacob and Rachel and Leah. God saw that Leah was unloved, so she was the first to have children. She has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. I love it when a plan comes together. You anticipated it. Rachel is jealous, so she comes up with a plan. Again, taking a page out of somebody else's playbook. What's that? Take my maid. So when Jacob married Leah and Rachel were giving gifts. One of those gifts were servants. Remember, they, as daughters, were servants in their own father's house. Now they are in their own household. They are kind of the woman of the house. Both of them, I'm not sure how that worked out. But they now have their own servants. Laban gave them servants, Zilpah and Bilhah, to his daughters. So, Rachel's plan, give her servant, Jacob, as a wife, and then she will raise her servant's children as her own. Okay, it worked out so well the first time for, back in the old days. Let's try it again. Jacob, being the nice, strong man, stands up to his wife and says, no, that's crazy. If only. Okay, sounds like a good plan to me. Takes on a third wife of Bilhah, who then has Dan and Naphtali. The family's growing. Leah hasn't had any kids in a while, so she pulls another trick out of Rachel's playbook and gives her servant Zilpah to Jacob as a fourth wife, who then has Gad and Asher. And you think soap operas are crazy today. We then have the mandrake incident that we talked about, which results in Leah having Issachar, followed by Zebulon, and Jacob's only daughter that we know of, Dinah. This brought the score to Leah 6, Bilhah 2, Zilpah 2, and Rachel 0. Rachel is losing. The Bible says that God did remember Rachel, and finally she gives birth to her first son, Joseph. All right, by this time, Jacob's work for women deal is expired, so he's got to find a new payment system with Uncle Laban. Am I wrong? Not at all. So, what's the new deal that they make? Jacob gets to go through Laban's herds and take out all of the unclean, the impure animals as his own. He will then have his own flock to manage. That's going to be his payment for continuing to work for Uncle Laban. Now, by impure animals, we mean perfectly healthy animals, not crippled, not lame, not in any way deformed. They just look different. Instead of having a constant color coat, they're speckled, they're spotted. Those are the impure ones. Laban agrees to this deal. Jacob goes through, pulls out the animals. It's also a very good way to determine whose is whose. If there's any found in either way, Jacob actually says to Laban, if you find a pure animal in my herd, then it's my fault. I will be the one to blame. I will make it right. So that's the new deal that he works out. Through Jacob's own knowledge and through God's blessings, being the key part here, Jacob soon ends up with a much larger herd and a much better quality herd. This was through just breeding techniques, but also God's blessings cannot be overlooked at all in this case. Jacob recognizes that those friendly family feelings are being replaced by anger and resentment, so he decides to slip away while Laban is out shearing sheep. Laban's daughters, Rachel and Leah, support Jacob's decisions, but what does Rachel take with her before she leaves? The family idols. These were probably little figurines. Don't know exactly what their significance was. Was it an actual spiritual belief? Was it just they were worth a lot? For some reason, she decides to take those with her. So Jacob and company start heading towards Canaan, but after 7 days, Laban catches up with them. God appears to Laban the night before. He's right there on his heels. He's going to get him the next day. God appears to Laban and says, basically, watch yourself. That's sum it up. You be careful when you talk to Jacob. So they end up coming together. Jacob and Laban have heated words, but eventually they do what all families do. They make up, they have a big meal, they shake hands. Not what all families do. They ended up putting a pile of rocks there and basically said, I'll stay on my side, you stay on your side. And they parted ways. So Jacob has escaped one threat. Laban could have come in and slaughtered everyone and been perfectly justified. There would have been no authority above Laban that could have held him accountable for that. And physically, he had the manpower to do it. So Jacob has escaped death and destruction once, but now he faces a new threat. What's that? Esau. It's been 20 years since Jacob left home, but he sends some messengers to find Esau, basically, hey, you still upset about that? The messengers, they find Esau, and they come back and say, Esau is so excited to see you, he's coming to meet you. And not only that, he's bringing 400 heavily armed guys with him. How did Jacob feel about this? Nervous, yeah. The Bible says basically he was scared senseless. The 400 guys are not coming to throw a party, a big welcome home party for Jacob with banners and balloons. They're there to do some damage, essentially finished what Laban didn't do. So Jacob says he does two things. First of all, he prays and asks for God's protection. That's a smart move. That's a very good decision. He also does something else. What was the second one? Just in case the whole, praying thing doesn't work out, I want to bribe him. I'm going to send a bunch of gifts to Esau, and I'm going to do it in 5 different waves. I'm going to send these groups of animals, a total of 550 animals. That's a lot in these different groups. That way, Esau gets to come up on them one at a time. Maybe he's going to get a little less mad every time. Or at least maybe he'll have to draw off some of those 400 men to watch his animals, and I might have a chance to escape. So he prays, but he also tries bribing Esau. Now, the night before they meet, Jacob's alone, and he ends up wrestling with a man who turns out to be God. Jacob ends up with a dislocated thigh, but he receives a blessing from God, and God does one other thing in this encounter. Changes his name from Jacob to Israel. What did we talk about Jacob meaning? Heel catcher, deceiver, schemer. And this is the type of person that Jacob was. He changes it to Israel. Israel means prince of God or powerful one with God. What name would you rather have? The second one. The second one's the right answer. The encounter seems to make a difference because instead of hiding, which is what I think Jacob would have done before this chance to meet with God, Jacob walks out and meets Esau man to man. And he does this around the area of Succoth. If you can hit the slide. There we go. A little bit different map that you might be able to see better. So he's come up from Haran all the way down. He's almost home. So he's around this area of Succoth where he meets Esau. Instead of Esau taking revenge, what happens? They hug, they cry, they make up. Esau ends up accepting the gifts, which I think had a bigger part to play than maybe we think sometimes. But Jacob, he's still not moving too well after his encounter with God. Remember the dislocated thigh? So he ends up making camp for a while right in this area by the river before moving with his family to the area near Shechem. And that's where the events of, remember the last time we talked about, really focused on. So Dinah, if you remember, is out with some local women from Shechem. A man named Shechem I'm guessing there was a connection there with the founder. He takes Dinah and lays with her by force. Now Shechem, clearly in the wrong here, but the Bible says he loved her and spoke tenderly to her. He then goes and asks his father to arrange marriage with him and Dinah. So he basically wants his father, Hamor, to go and speak to Jacob and arrange the marriage. Very common thing. Now Jacob and his brothers, they find out what happened. So the brothers are ready when Shechem comes to camp. The brothers say that, okay, we'll let you marry our sister, but what was the arrangement? You, Shechem, and every other male in your entire town have to be circumcised. Remember, circumcision was something that God passed to Abraham that wasn't practiced outside of that Abraham group. What Shechem say? Sounds like a plan to me. So he is willing to be circumcised, but he's also willing to talk every other person, every other male in the town being circumcised as well. Do you think that took a few favors? Now, Shechem agrees. Now, if you take the facts that Shechem, he wanted to marry Dinah. We know that. He was willing to put himself through some pretty intense pain. We know that. He was willing to go out on a limb and ask all of his buddies to go do the same thing. The Bible says that he loved Dinah. And it appears that Dinah willingly stayed with him in Shechem. She willingly stayed with this man. There may have been some affection there on the part of Dinah too. We don't know. I think there's a lot to that story that we could look at, but there appears to have been something. Again, completely terrible act, but the end result is Shechem doing a lot of things in order to keep her as his wife. So either way, what was the brothers' real reason for making circumcision the condition of marriage? Exactly. The brothers, they wait 3 days, and then Simeon and Levi, so two of Diana's full brothers from Leah, they wait 3 days to make sure all the men have, it's going to take some time to do the procedure, and then it's going to take a couple days for them to get really nice and sore and defenseless. So 3 days later, they descend upon the town and they kill everyone in it. So Shechem has done this very horrible deed of taking Dinah in some way by force. Levi and Simeon have killed everyone in the town. Who's worse? Or is sin, sin, and it doesn't really matter what sin you commit, it's all the same in God's eyes? This is it's a terrible story to think about it, especially that these were God's chosen people that did this horrible act. These are not perfect people. I hope we never make decisions like that. But we need to continue to strive for perfection in God, realizing we will make mistakes, hopefully not to that degree. So, the town everyone's dead. The other brothers, they're not involved in the killing, but what do? They see an opportunity and they take all the stuff. So, I guess you could call them better, I don't know. But they take everything, they go loot the town. Jacob doesn't seem to know about what the brothers' plans were ahead of time, but he doesn't appear too happy when he finds out what happened either. However, he's scared of what's going to happen when all the other towns find out. He's a pretty powerful person. But if every other group in the region ganged up on him, would he stand a chance? Probably not. So he decides to move his family about 20 miles away to Bethel and build an altar. So he goes south about 20 miles down to Bethel, builds the altar there. Now this is going to be the same place that God first appeared to Jacob when he was running away from Esau. I think there is some connection there as well. This is maybe to him a safe place because this is where God first spoke to me. Maybe he's looking for a little extra protection too. All right, so putting together all the things that the sons have and the reminder of this first encounter with God, going back to Bethel, and all the blessings that he's possibly received from God, we go to Genesis 35, 2 and 4. You might want to turn to that one. I don't have that one up there. And this is where we left it off. So Genesis 35, 2 through 4. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods which are among you, and purify yourselves and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which they had and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was near Shechem. There appears to be a lot of these little g gods in the camp. Excuse me. If he had to get them from lots of people, who did he get at least some of them from? Very likely. Remember, Rachel probably still had the household gods that she stole from her father Laban. So he takes all these idols and buries them near Shechem. I think Jacob finally realizes he has a problem. He is on this, you could say, spiritual high of God speaking to him on the ladder incident. 20 years, he thinks he's experienced a very steady decline. I think maybe he had another little shot in the encounter with God where he got his name changed, but then soon afterwards, he sees his sons do these terrible, terrible acts. That combined with looks around, sees all the blessings that God promised to me in this very same spot 20 years ago when I had nothing and I was running for my life. Oh no, this is where it comes crashing down. What has my life become? I just see this as a rock bottom moment for Jacob. It finally hits him. My spiritual health is gone. Not only that, the spiritual health of my family is in a terrible, terrible place. So he says, we're going to get rid of all of these other gods, all these other distractions, all these things that are putting distance between us and God. We're going to get rid of them. I'm going to go to Bethel and I'm going to build an altar and we're going to worship God. So that was where we left off last time. And I think that's a good place. We'll stop now and then pick up whenever I'm teaching again, another month or so. But it really gives... What? Left. It really it gives us a good picture of all the spiritual highs and lows that these people went through, and to see the way that God protected and God blessed them, and even through some very bad decisions, God still cared for these people and loved them. And I think that's an important lesson that we need today as well. So comments, questions? All right, so at the end of our Investigate time, we are also offering the Lord's Supper for anyone who didn't have it. So the thought being that if teachers were downstairs teaching and didn't have the opportunity to take part in the Lord's Supper, we wanted to make sure they had that opportunity here as well. So is there anyone that was downstairs and would like that chance? Okay. We want to make sure that offer was out there. So, same time next week, same place. I will close in prayer. Father, we just thank you so much for the opportunity to come together as your body of believers this morning, to dive into your word, to sing hymns of you, to come around your table, and just to worship together as a family. Please guide us as we go out into the world. Help us to be those witnesses for you, the lights that shine, and we ask other people to see that, to come and ask, and to hopefully draw and come near to that connection with you. Thank you so much for your love and for your Son. It's through his name we pray. Amen.